the simple fact is that, and specifically we're talking about the COVID-19 vaccine, which doesn't exist yet. We don't know what the risk-benefit profile of it is, and it's quite clear from the data that this is not nearly as virulent or deadly as it was made out to be originally. And so the other thing is that people who are dying from it are clearly people who are sick previously by their own choices. They ate poorly, they smoked, they didn't exercise, they made choices. And yet the public at large, who may work very hard and spend a lot of money keeping up their health, is being told that they're going to be forced to vaccinate with a vaccine that, again, we don't know the efficacy of and we don't know the side effects of. So how can that possibly be right? It flies in the face of all good government, and it certainly violates the principle, that I was taught as a physician, which is primum non nocere, which means first do no harm. So it's just, this is all political theater, and it's an agenda to get people vaccinated because it serves certain special interests.
This is about the money in a lot of ways, isn't it?
I have no doubt of that. I mean, it's just absurd the way that the whole thing is set up. I mean, look at the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Act. I mean, it's $4.4 billion at least of taxpayer dollars that have been paid out to the to people who've suffered from privately held products, and the vaccine industry doesn't have liability. That's unprecedented. Your builder's liable if your house collapses on you. Your gun manufacturer is liable if your gun misfires. Your plumber is liable if they make a mistake and there's a massive leak in your house and your house floods and you have to do hundreds of thousands of dollars in remediation. But if your child is injured by a vaccine, which is it's not a matter of debate that vaccines can cause injury, it's merely a matter of debate as to what degree, how often, and so on and so forth, right? And yet the vaccine manufacturers have no liability? That's a recipe for corporate malfeasance. And of course, the vaccine manufacturers, the pharmaceutical industry, has been convicted many, many times of criminal activity. Are they ever sent to jail? No, they get fined. They get fined and they get slapped on the wrist, and then they go back to business, basically brainwashing Americans into thinking that the solution to their problems is drugs that don't actually fix their medical issues.
How appalling is this mandate issued by this unelected official in Virginia? What information does he have to justify what he's saying?
I mean, I'm sure that he would say that he was speaking in the event of a vaccine that worked and was safe and effective, and he's also speaking from a place where he thinks that COVID-19 is extremely deadly and that it is really the pandemic of the century. And quite frankly, I think that, the data just doesn't support him in those assertions. I mean, this pandemic is not, I wouldn't call it a pandemic. It's a problem. It's a disease. People are sick. People are dying. I have friends in New York City. I have friends in New Jersey who worked through the COVID-19 pandemic at the peak of it, who saw the sickest patients, who had lots of patients on ventilators. They were very clear with me that something happened, something is going on. But, I work in rural America, and I've seen 3 cases in 8 months, and one of them was a false positive. So you're going to tell me everybody ought to be vaccinated over a virus that seems to be harming a very, very small proportion of Americans, most of whom were already extremely old or malnourished or extremely sick? That doesn't hold water.
And you, did you say you trained at UVA?
I did. I went to University of Virginia School of Medicine. Graduated in 2014.
And where do you practice now?
I practice down in Colonial Heights, Virginia at Andrews Wellness Consulting.
What's your message right now to not just Virginians, but to the American people?
They need to wake up to the fact that the mainstream media is not telling them the truth about their health, because the reality is that the mainstream media works for the people who pay their salaries, and that's the top advertisers. And you can go through the list of the top advertisers on any mainstream media network, and you will see that they are producing things that either make you sick or treat the sicknesses that you have. Why would anyone who's got that agenda tell you how to be healthy?
Right. Very good. And just as an aside, what about hydroxychloroquine? What's your thoughts on that?
So I have no personal experience using hydroxychloroquine because I've seen no cases of COVID in which I had an opportunity to prescribe it. I have dear colleagues who are very exceptional, I would say exceptional physicians. One of the best doctors I know I'm thinking of right now was on the Ingram Angle when hydroxychloroquine came out, and he said he was in contact with many doctors in New York City who were using it and thought it worked. And unfortunately, it's frankly just shouldn't be a matter of debate that America's and really the world's medical journals, whether it's the Lancet or the New England Journal of Medicine or the Green Journal from the American College of Internal Medicine, they're for sale. They are, I mean, their policies regarding publications have been so irresponsible in this pandemic. It is tragic, actually, because it's really undermining the public's confidence in science. And, we just can't trust them anymore because they've done such a horrible job of deciding what to publish.
You're talking about a scam here.
A scam sort of implies that someone's going to make a lot of money. And yeah, the vaccine manufacturers will make a lot of money. I find this increasingly or even more distasteful because we're subsidizing their research, right? So how does that make any sense? Where's my discount? Do I get a cut of the royalties from this thing? Where's my check in the mail, right? So people just need to be aware of how corrupt this process is. The government's for sale, and I don't really know anybody who disagrees with that, and yet they keep voting for the same bozos from either the establishment Republican Party or the establishment Democrat Party, neither of whom are really concerned about freedom and essential liberty. And, fortunately, we have a lot of outside contenders to a certain extent in both parties who are now saying we need to be free, we need to focus on these real problems. But Americans need to realize the mainstream media always marginalizes these people as left or right-wing wingnuts. And they got to just stop tuning into the mainstream media because they're the real problem.
And your website?
StillmanMD.com. That's STILLMAN. M as in medical, D as in doctor.com.
What is motivating you to do what you're doing?
Well, we can't back down from mandatory vaccination because when you destroy choice and liberty, that's just not, no one can condone that. No one can be on board with that. If you want to vaccinate your kids according to any schedule you want, that's your choice, right? But the idea that we would force other people to engage in a medical practice is so, to be frank, the first historical example that comes to mind is like the Nazi doctors. How can we not see that this is totally inappropriate and it should not be a partisan issue? This is simply inexcusable. So I decided to come out today because I'm up to date on all my vaccines. I've had every single one that I needed to have because I needed to get to work. And the more research I've done on it, the more I've read about it, the more it's become clear to me that most of these illnesses are mild in people who are properly nourished. And so the first question should really be, how well nourished are people? How healthy are they? Because if they're not healthy, they're not going to withstand any disease, no matter what their vaccination status. And so, the focus is, the bottom line in America is that preventative medicine that gets done and mandated by the government is always making someone a lot of money. And that's wrong, because the best healers I know are fresh air, clean water, sunlight, fresh, local, natural food, positive people, and exercise.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.